Dear listener, you have to go right now. Please, I want you to go to the Politicrat Daily Podcast online store because there's so much there waiting for you. So much. T-shirts, hats. I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg. And then you've got hoodies and pens and mugs. Oh my goodness me, it just never ends. I mean, you can get lost in there. You really can. So much more. Drinkware. Socks. That's right, socks. I mean, if you want to get fitted and kitted, this is the place to be. The Politicrat Daily Podcast online store. Shop there right now at the-politicrat.myshopify.com. That's the-politicrat.myshopify.com. Thank you for your support. Welcome to the Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore. It is Wednesday, April the 28th, 2021. On this edition of the Politicrat, the police and what they do. Stories from the street and from the everyday lives of at least two people that you may not be so familiar with. One of them is Andrew Brown Jr. Plus, a look at the Prime Minister of the UK and the latest sleaze that he is continuing to roll around in. It is Hump Day, and welcome back. Hump Day, yes, Wednesday, April the 28th, 2021. How are you on this Wednesday? That was Digital Underground, and the Humpty Dance, of course, Humpty Hump, a.k.a. Gregory Jacobs, and we know him also as Shock G. Now, the late, great Shock G, who passed away last week. And he was just 57 years of age, and I did a tribute here on this podcast to him. Just a really finely talented, smart person who was gone too soon, had a lot of struggles in life. And again, my condolences to the members of his family. And may Shock G, a.k.a. Gregory Jacobs, a.k.a. Humpty, rest in power. So here we are on this Wednesday, and my goodness me, we're almost at the end of April, and lots to get to, or a few things to get to on this day. We've got Supreme Court arguments being heard, oral arguments in various cases, as we get down here now to the last couple of months of the United States Supreme Court term. It's always the time of year now from this point in April to the end of June, where here in the United States Supreme Court gives out these blockbuster decisions, some of them really consequential blockbuster decisions, and others of them not so much, but still a lot of news on the docket that I'm sure the Supreme Court, with its decisions, will be making. They've already made some already. We've talked about, I've mentioned them, I should say, with the Jones versus Mississippi case a week or two ago, with I think it was last week with Brett Kavanaugh, saying that sentences of juveniles do not have to consider whether or not they are going to be this danger to the public, whether they are going to be perennially incorrigible. That's not the thing. You know, you don't have to take into account whether they're going to be permanently incorrigible or perennially incorrigible. Doesn't matter. you can just throw them in prison for the rest of their lives without parole. So no matter that they're juveniles, and it doesn't matter. You don't have to look at whether they're going to be like this for the rest of their lives or not. So that's what Jones versus Mississippi was in a nutshell. Decided, and that's how it was decided. That was the opinion, the majority opinion. We'll see how the United States Supreme Court does over these next couple of months. I mean, spoiler alert, I don't think it's going to be that great. It is a 6-3 court. Excuse my cynicism. But it's a 6-3 court, which is 6 people who are very conservative and 3 people who are not very conservative at all. They are on the other end of the scale, if you will. So that is what you really should expect here. The decision I'm going to be keeping my eyes on is going to be this California versus Texas decision for those of you out there who have healthcare through the Obamacare system, through healthcare.gov, through Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. I'm just curious to see what the court's going to do with that. Because, as you know, 1 week after the election of last November, 1 week after that, November 10th, 2020, Supreme Court heard arguments. The U.S. Supreme Court heard oral arguments in the case of California versus Texas. So we shall see, and that had to do with scrapping Obamacare, which, of course, the previous administration had been spending the better part of all of its 4 years trying to do in courts in Texas. And now they've got themselves this particular Supreme Court case. Now we'll see whether or not the court, which now has 6 staunchly conservative people on it, and I include Chief Justice Roberts in that, we'll see if they decide to scrap your health care if you're someone who relies on health care that's a bit more affordable. We'll see. I want to see what they're going to do. I want to see just how cruel these Supreme Court justices can be. Well, we've seen over the decades and centuries just how cruel the U.S. Supreme Court has been to black people. We've seen how cruel they've been to Asian people, to Japanese people particularly as well. We've seen how cruel the country's been to the groups I've just mentioned. The Chinese Exclusion Act, Dred Scott case, Plessy v. Ferguson, and a host of other cases. Korematsu v. the United States. And how that turned things and changed things to some degree, you know. But there's still realities in this country. There's still realities. We need to end hatred against Asian people, end the violence against Asian people. There are still Asian people every day in the United States who are being killed, who are being attacked, who are being assaulted, who are being violated, who are being accosted, hostile after hostile, well, let me just say it like this, hostility after hostility visited upon Asian people who are just minding their own business, walking down the street, and some, whether they're black, whether they're white, whether whomever they are attacking them. And all of you have got to knock it off. Whoever's doing this has got to stop. It's got to end here. Enough is enough. I'm fed up of it. I don't know about you, but I am fed up of it. And we have to do everything we can to stop AAPI hate. I say stop Asian hate, period. I don't want to limit it to, I get it, the Asian American Pacific Islander groups are being affected the most. But look, any person who's Asian, whether they be Chinese, Japanese, Taiwanese, you know, I can go on and on and on with all the different countries. But look, Filipino, you know, whomever, you know, whatever, you know, any of the groups in the Asian, the Thai, whether in the Asian region, any Asian person, I don't care who you are, this has got to stop. There's no excuse for violence against Asian people. There are some other things I want to say before getting to some of the things I really want to talk about on this episode. One of them is to remind people that Black Lives Matter, to remind people that all lives do not matter until Black lives also matter. And it is important to keep saying that. Black lives matter. And we are going to continue to say that, to act that, to be that. And we will continue on to make it very clear that we have humanity, we are humanity. And we're not asking, or at least let me just limit it to me because I don't want to speak for anybody else. I am not asking you to like me, honestly. To whomever this applies to whomever this applies. I'm not asking you to like me. Honestly, I'm not. Because whether you like me or not is frankly inconsequential. It's about whether you respect me, number one, and whether you see my humanity. And that matters. Because whether I like you or not, I see your humanity, and I respect it, and I respect you. And that's what counts at the end of the day, that we respect each other, that we see each other's humanity, and that we have an ounce of compassion for each other. I talk about compassion, and I have from time to time. And I do think it's worth talking about it again. Because you can be dissatisfied, upset, and galvanized about the state of this world that we find ourselves being in. You can be upset and galvanized at the state of the world, and you can be upset at that and all. But that doesn't somehow mean that you're not compassionate as a person. In fact, in my way of thinking, it means you're more compassionate. It means that you care. Just because you may listen to persons other than not just me, but anybody saying things that we need to do to change the world and that this world is a miserable place in a lot of areas. And there's some great things in the world, but there's some really awful things going on that need to stop. That doesn't mean I or we hate the world. It doesn't mean I or we hate the countries we live in. It means we want to make them better countries for all of us. It means we want to make the country a better place in which to live. For us, obviously, because we're the ones getting killed in the country by police. And for anyone who wishes to come here. We all get to win in that way in the end. So I want to just platform off of that when I talk about Black Lives Mattering, is that we all have a stake here. And we've got to keep fighting for Black lives. And we've got to keep fighting for a better and more just system. And that means really scrapping the system that you got here, because this ain't working. And the people who are controlling the system have got no interest. None, zip, zada, nada. They've got no interest in changing the dynamics of the system at all so that it actually recognizes your humanity and my humanity as Black people. There's no interest in the system doing that. And all this talk about reform is talk about moving around the chairs, but not getting rid of the wood and the material that they're made out of. That's what reform is in a systemic way, in my view, is that when you move around the deck chairs, you arrange the deck chairs differently. The feng shui may be a little different, but the material out of those chairs is not. It's got the same DNA in it. And that same DNA is what is the thing that injects this system with all of the death possibilities that it has for Black people, for brown people, right? So you can rearrange the deck chairs with your little reform, but that ain't doing jack. We have got to get rid of the DNA of the system, the materials, right? And as many would argue, we have to get rid of the system and put in place a system that actually recognizes our humanity. Because if you don't have a system that is at least at the minimum predicated upon recognizing the humanity of black people, the humanity of brown people, you're going to have the same thing that you've been having for 400 years in the United States. You're going to have the same thing you've been having for 500 years in the United States with the case of the Native American communities. You're going to have that again. This whole country, at least from the USA onwards, or even before that, was birthed in violence. So if you have a country and a system that's birthed in violence, what are you going to have? A violent country. What are you going to have? Guns all over the blooming place and gun violence running amok. What are you going to have when you've had enslavement patrols? Violent police, murdering black folk. Hey, 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 surprise, surprise. What do you know, right? You have a country and a system that's birthed in violence and that came out of violence. Well, hey, presto, you're going to have a country and a system that continues to be violent against black people. And what did we see last night in Elizabeth City? This is what we heard last night in Elizabeth City and the reaction specifically. By the way, I should say, for those of you who are not especially fond of foul language, what you are about to hear will contain quite a bit of foul language.
My nephew's sitting here hurt as fuck.
Friends, a
Hurt as
family.
fuck.
I feel like he deserved it.
This is Brown. Brown right here.
Bitch,
Fuck
I don't
this
give a
city.
fuck if I stole a candy bar when I was in kindergarten. What the fuck I did back then ain't got shit to do with fucking
He
today.
deserved it because of the life he chose to live. They
And
said.
that's why we
That's
choose
what
that
he
life.
did, they said.
But hold on, wait. They take my fucking father. I see he ain't got no father. I go to the fucking streets. I end up selling drugs. You take me from my fucking kids. Where the fuck they gonna go to?
And
The
he
fucking
still-
streets.
And he still ain't had no hate for you motherfuckers. I can't stand none of y'all ass right now.
That nigga
Fucking sell out. Fucking suck.
And then once I go in, I can't get out, right? Once I go in, I'm always a fucking criminal. Dirty ass bastard.
Y'all swear. Y'all.
Break to the back of the head. You stand by the I don't see more between with them as
And I'm saying that, y'all know how battle I am. Y'all just asking y'all to leave. Go home. Don't leave here. You know you don't want to be here. Shit wrong. My kids listen, they start throwing up. And they just never have no peace.
Yeah. Hey, yo, y'all might as well go ahead and put white hoods on and just stand together like that. Y'all might as well just put white hoods on right now. Just put the hood on right now, man. Yeah, go just put the white hood on right now. You probably got one at the crib. Your wife made it this. Eyes all fucked up. You can't see out of it.
Y'all some dirty ass bastard. I swear to God. Y'all all just
About that when I lost my voice, I stopped coming.
How y'all live with y'all fucking self? How y'all live with y'all fucking
No
self?
voice every day because I have a black son in the city.
And then
On
y'all
the
do this
same
shit for
street.
other
On
motherfuckers
the
and we
same
can't even fucking
motherfucking
hear
street
about
y'all
it.
killed
Cause y'all do that shit so undercover. That shit don't make no motherfucking sense. I got it.
So that's what you heard. This was last night, Tuesday night, April 27th, 2021, in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. The curfew that was being set and had been set by authorities there. And there was a violation of that curfew from some of the residents. This is all in response, of course, to the execution of Andrew Brown Jr., a black man, I believe was 42 years of age, who was literally the last few days now this happened. I think it was last week sometime. The video shows it, was at night. It was at nighttime. Not that that matters because we get killed day, night, morning, noon, by the police. And for no reason. We didn't do anything to get murdered. It's the police who say, oh, there's a black person over there, I'm going to kill him, and I know I'm going to get away with it. And that's what they know before they even encounter us minding our business. So he's got his hands on the steering wheel of his vehicle. He complies with all the commands that the police put at him. He bark at him. And then they murder him. They shoot him 5 times, including once in the back of the head. Right? So this is what the residents of Elizabeth City were responding to. And then, the curfews. I talked about this yesterday, how a violent system reacts violently to those reacting to that violent system. The boarding up of the communities and the businesses and the whole blooming city, and telling them to stay calm. Oh, be calm while we keep killing you. Be calm. That's how pathological and how sociopathic and how psychopathic the country and the system is, right? It kills us and then tells us to be quiet, be calm, and you've got so much grace and dignity in how you handle this when your son or daughter's been killed. That's the system, right? That's the behavior. That's the societal response from a lot of quarters, is that when we've lost our daughter to police violence, we've lost our son to police violence, our mother, our father, our uncle, our aunt, brother or sister. You've got people in the world, in this country. Look at the way they've handled it. Whether they're white people saying this or other people saying this. Look at the, whomever is saying this, but particularly in the news media, corporate news. And the politicians too. Look at the way they've handled it, their dignity and grace. That's not what you say to a family who's lost a loved one. I'm sorry, that's not what they want to hear, I don't think. If I may be so presumptuous. They don't want to hear about the grace and dignity they've got. Speaker Pelosi, they don't want to hear about that. What if they weren't graceful in your view, Speaker Pelosi, or anyone else? I want to pick on her. I've already had my turn with Speaker Pelosi last week. But to any politician, black, white, or what if they weren't dignified? What if they reacted and they were pissed off? Then what do you say? This should not be about whether a family is reacting in a way that you're comfortable with. This should be about you and the system that you are a part of actually doing something to stop these murders. And I get it. There's the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. That I understand. I know the House has passed that. The Senate has not. At least not yet. And by the way, that Policing Act has some protections, but it doesn't go as far, nearly as far as it should. And you've got all these politicians, black and white, calling for this blooming thing to be passed. I'm supporting it. I'm in support of it being passed. But there's got to be more teeth in what's being passed. Now, look, some of the things are very good. Banning chokeholds altogether. Banning that knee to the neck. And I believe it is banned in some police departments, but obviously not in others. Because I'm going to tell you a story about that coming up in a few moments. But we need to get this thing passed, first of all. But we also need to put teeth in it so that it's much, much stronger than it is. But this is Washington, D.C. You've got to quibble and argue about the detail. While we're getting murdered and executed in the streets, you've got some suits and ties and blouses in D.C., right? Negotiating, and I get it. I'm not trying to be belittling any of this, but our lives are being belittled. While you all on Capitol Hill negotiate or don't about what's going on. And this is why I keep telling you, you have to put up a list of things that are important to you, dear listener. And I really do hope that you actually do this. Spend 10 minutes, 3 issues, particularly, again, here in the U.S., 3 issues that you feel strongly about. Whether it's a woman's right to choose and keeping abortion clinics open in this country, which they should always be, or in any other country, right? Whether it is immigration and making sure that people who come here are being treated with respect and are not being thrown into concentration camps and behind barbed wire fences and being attacked is on top of all of that. Or whether it is changing the criminal justice system or the injustice system. That audio you heard from Elizabeth City last night through, and I forget the name of the organization, I believe it's called Silent Coup. They had provided some live coverage, and they're not the only ones. Roland Martin does as well, of last night in Elizabeth City and the arrests that police made. Police arrested peaceful people. A, for, I guess, violating the curfew, because there's this curfew that's still going on. And B, for, I guess, I don't know, just sitting in the road. I guess they found that to be civil disobedience, the police. Go eat some donuts, good grief. And then you look at this. The thing you don't see, obviously, since you're listening, is that you've got people in that video that you heard the audio from. Police dressed like RoboCop. Honestly, these people are in, it looks like metallic, but it's all fatigue greens, and their armor looks very, it's kind of dark greenish, black. It looks like RoboCop. They look like, some of them in the background as they're walking around. You've got 100 police at least there in this little area, a phalanx of police. And in the background, you look in the background of the shot and you see people walking around wearing what looks like a RoboCop armor, but it's in fatigue, it's in green or in black. Seriously, the militarization of the Elizabeth City police. And that is how it's been across the country. You bring the war zone of Afghanistan, of Iraq, to the United States. And as I've always said to you, foreign policy is what informs domestic policy, not the other way around. People think, well, we're exporting the violence. It's really that we are doing in these other countries like Syria, dropping bombs. People have already forgotten that in February, just around Valentine's Day or on Valentine's Day, or just before it or after it, in February of this year, 2021, that President Biden dropped bombs on Syria. People have forgotten that already. But our foreign policy in the United States informs what we do here domestically. It is actually a warning to us domestically. Hey, don't you dare get out of line. Think I'm joking? Okay. Look back at the last 60 years of American administrations and see if I'm not telling you the truth. Look at what those administrations did overseas. And you tell me if that was not something that informed what was being done domestically. Look at Abu Ghraib in 2003 with George W. Bush, who now in some quarters is given this fond welcome as if he never did any kind of war crime at all. Then look at what's happening domestically with the way police treat black people. And you tell me that what is happening in Iraq or in Afghanistan or back in Vietnam or any of these other places doesn't inform what's going on here. Global perspective. I keep saying it. Like I say, it's okay. If you want to celebrate your vaccination, fine. You want to go on social media, fine. A quiet celebration at home, yeah, I think that's good. But to be plastering it on social media, again, you hate when I say this to you. Because I know some of you have done that, right? You've gone on social media, and I'm getting to my point. You've gone on social media, right? And you've celebrated that, and you've made a show of it, or you've just celebrated it, and you're entitled to. I just think there's something about a nice, quiet celebration with loved ones, or, if you can, right, in this pandemic, right, and do it that way. I guess I'm old-fashioned. There's things I celebrate, like my football team getting promoted to the Premier League. I do that publicly. I just think that with this pandemic, there's got to be a global perspective, right? Doesn't there? And I keep talking about global perspectives. If you've listened to me long enough, you will know that I think that's so important. And I kind of touched on it yesterday. We are really trained to only think about, and I guess there's a human nature aspect to this too, but the media is a big part of this as well, and the way that the country behaves, or the way that any country behaves, is that we're taught to think that our country is the only one that matters, and that we shouldn't care about or think about what's going on the rest of the globe, rest of the planet. And that's the whole thing about this whole celebration, so-called public celebration of getting vaccinated that gets put on social media. Because then you think about the Indias of the world, right? Who, you've got people dying, in the thousands daily, just like they were here, and like they were in the UK, like they were in other countries. And now it's 17 and 16 a day in the UK, 17 a day in the UK. And it's lower here. And so people have the idea, this pandemic's over. You've got the CDC giving you this terrible directive. If you're fully vaccinated, you don't really need to wear a mask in a public space unless there's lots of people around you. Well, I just think that's horrible. You should be telling people to continue to wear masks, right? We've got to have a global perspective. And I keep saying that. I'm not going to be publicly celebrating Jack on social media when in a country not all that far away, we're on the same planet together. If we're in the same human family, then that shouldn't stop when it comes to thinking about other countries where people are never going to get vaccinated, or the vaccinations are really few and far between. I'm not saying put your life on pause and don't celebrate anything. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, I guess I'm saying that if you're going to celebrate this publicly on your social media accounts, keep in mind those people that are dying. I guess people don't care about that though, do they now? Do they now? I guess you can celebrate and care about them, but can you? It just shows this, putting this on social media shows to me this kind of selfish, insensitive, morally blind. Excuse me for being on my little moral hobby horse, buckaroo horse, or whatever. Buckaroo, I remember that game from such a long time ago. Do they still do buckaroo? But the global perspective is so important, and this is why I make this point. Because in Elizabeth City, yes, I'm back to that because I've not forgotten what I'm going to say. In Elizabeth City, North Carolina, this brother was murdered, Andrew Brown Jr. People were protesting, and they're getting arrested. They're not disturbing the peace. They're not doing that. They're not disturbing the peace. Not one bit. They're peacefully assembled. There are pastors there. They're, members of the club. They're all arrested too. And one of them said, you didn't hear it on the audio. One of them said, you're arresting the wrong people. In the UK, remember this last month? The women who were there protesting, just silently observing the vigil for Sarah Everard. Do you remember her? Sarah Everard, right? the Metropolitan Police officer has been arrested for that killing of Sarah Everard. And I know in the UK, you really can't say publicly that this cop did it. Although I'm going to say he did. I'm not in the UK, but this is going into the UK. And I know he has a right to a defense. But what I'm saying is I think he's guilty of sin. We'll see. We'll see what happens with the jury. That trial is not going to take place until, I think, I don't know when. He's going to make his next appearance in July. Wayne Couzens is the name of the Metropolitan Police officer who has been arrested and has been remanded in custody. And I believe the trial is not going to be until October of this year. Don't worry, that's going to be here in 5 minutes. May is this Saturday. So if May is this Saturday, October is going to be what? 2 Tuesdays away? Oh, the time. And you can't stop time. And you're not going to stop the point I'm going to make here because I'm going to get to it. Not that you would want to stop me on this. Maybe you would. Maybe you'd rather hear about tea and biscuits instead of what's going on in the real world around you. But I don't think you're that kind of person because otherwise you wouldn't be listening here. And I thank you for listening, by the way. But the people arrested in the UK for peacefully assembling. And, this whole bill in the House of Commons about, well, we're going to limit protesting and we deem anything to be a disturbance of the peace. And so therefore, effectively, you can't protest any blooming thing. This is all connected. We are a human family. What happens in that human family is different from person to person, certainly when it comes to us as black folk. Right? That white folk do not experience. They just don't experience on a daily basis being hounded by police, being stopped by police for BS, for nothing, for air freshener, for nothing. They don't experience that. Any white person, listen to me, has not experienced the daily terror when they see a police officer wondering if that police officer is going to end their life. They don't wonder about that. That ain't a thing. They may be worried about, oh my goodness, am I going to get a ticket and can I talk my ass out of it? But they are not worrying about whether or not when the police stop them, it's going to be the last time they ever see a police officer in their life because they're going to be worrying about being killed by one. That's not what a white person's concern is. And I'm a black man, and I don't have to be white to tell you that. And you don't have to be white to know that's the truth. And you don't have to be black to know that that's the truth either. Is that white people do not have to worry about whether the police are going to be killing them.
Remember, we only kill black people. Yeah, we only kill black people, right? All the videos you've seen, have you seen white people get killed? You have.
I don't know what's in his heart, but I certainly know what came out of his mouth. And it's inexcusable, and we have to take appropriate action.
Yeah. So there you go. The white person doesn't have to worry about being killed by the police. And that's the video, that's the audio that I've long wanted to play to you. I keep telling you, dear listener, about the police officer in Cobb County, Georgia, who said, remember, hey, we only kill black people, right? So that's the audio of it that you just heard. Finally, you get to hear that in case you have not heard it. That was in July of 2016 in Marietta, Georgia. So, again, to make that point, white people don't have to worry about being killed by a cop, right? So the second voice you heard there was the chief of the Marietta police saying that we're going to take action, and that meant getting rid of, firing this cop, which they did. Now, my question is, and I hadn't looked this up, did that cop who said that get another job somewhere, number one? And number two, did he get to keep his pension? Did he? Did that white male cop get to keep his pension? Because you can get rid of a police officer like that, fire him or her or them, right? And if you don't get rid of their pension, what does the firing mean? They get to enjoy it. Well, obviously it means they're not on the force. But if they keep their pension, heck, they'll do it again. If they know that they can keep their pension, what's to stop them from doing that again? And what you need to do is make sure this person can't just go to another police department and get another job, like Timothy Loman did after he assassinated Tamir Rice, the 12-year-old boy. And less than 6 months later, that guy was off somewhere in Ohio at another job. Just like this guy in Kenosha, Wisconsin, who shot Jacob Blake Jr. 8 times in the back, paralyzing him for life. He gets to get back on his job too. He gets his job back. Less than 6 months later, he's back on the job. Pension intact, money intact, everything intact. So, again, this is the world we're living in, folks. It's part of the world we're living in. And I want to get back to, again, this is what people are fighting for. Justice, to stop this garbage from happening in Elizabeth City. It happened to Andrew Brown Jr. And why do people think that there are protests and there are people who are upset? People have had enough. It's not the first time something like this has happened in that city. People get this idea, I think. This is my perception, dear listener, that I believe, at least, my perception is, I should say, is that there are people on this planet who think, ooh, that's the first time that's happened in Elizabeth City. Ooh, that's the first time that's happened in Kenosha. Ooh, that's the first time that's happened in Atlanta. Ooh, that's the first time that's happened in fill in any American city. It's not the first time it's happened. It's happened in every American city. Every American city has had this, where a black person or a brown person has been murdered by the police. And more than once. This ain't the first rodeo for Elizabeth City, for, Brooklyn Center, or Minneapolis. Minneapolis has had a long-ass history of police murdering black folk. There's a load of cases. Black people being shot 28 times, 35 times, guy in handcuffs shot dead. This is happening so often. And like I said yesterday, it's become passé, which is really dangerous. It's happening that often. Oh, another one. Oh, fuck it, there's another one. And they just go on to the next episode. It's just really, really disturbing. That it's happening, first of all, is the most disturbing thing. And we've got to put an end to this. But really, it's the system that we have to put an end to, because it's the system that's doing this. The police aren't acting alone, on their own volition only. They're acting with the behest and the support of the system that has protected them and will protect them. You saw how pissed off Judge Bruce Cahill was last week when he had to read out that verdict. He wasn't a happy camper. And he's the one who, in June, in a few short weeks, June the 16th, is going to be sentencing the guy who he seemed visibly upset to be reading a verdict about. And we have to keep the pressure on. We really do in Minneapolis and all over the world. We've got to write to the people in Minneapolis, in government there. And to the extent that you can even get to the Hennepin County Courthouse, write to people there. I know maybe the judge will never get to see this, but you've got to make your voice heard, because people have already begun to move away from Derek Chauvin. And, like I say, don't isolate Derek Chauvin like he's the one really extremely bad, violent cop. You've got hundreds of them in the Minneapolis Police Department over the years. Hundreds of them. Oh my God, like he's the only one, Derek Chauvin's the only cop in the whole entire force in Minneapolis who has ever done this. Oh, come on. What are we, stupid? And the fact that, again, all these police officers and the police chief, and I like Medaria Arredondo, and I may be mispronouncing his name, and I apologize. I like the guy. I think he's a genuine human being. Well, he's a genuine human being, of course. He is. A genuine stand-up person who really does care about doing his job and doing it well. And he does care about those communities. That's what I think. Now, I'm not living in Minneapolis, but the people who are can give me or you or us the truth about whether or not that is the correct assessment, and the truth about who they think he is, having, as people who are residents of the actual community. But the thing is, they knew this, Medaria, right? I'll just call him that. Chief Medaria knew this, right, about Derek Chauvin, that he had 18, 19 plus complaints, including being involved in the death of at least one black man, shot that man, maybe killed that man as well, involved and doing this did these knee to the neck situations, listen to me. He did this before to black people. He did this previously to black people in the same city. This guy was well known to be violent, and the jury didn't even get to hear that. Like I said last week, or I think it's last week, had they heard that, they would have convicted him in 5 minutes. Those deliberations wouldn't have lasted 10 hours. They would have lasted 5 minutes. But speaking of knees to the neck, I want to introduce you to Angel Zapata Hernandez. He died in San Diego a few months before George Floyd with the very same knee to the neck. And nobody knows who, well, except for people in his family and a few others, knows who Angel Zapata Hernandez was. I say was because he was killed by the police. This was literally a few months before George Floyd, October 15th of 2019, 24 years old. And like George Floyd, he was also handcuffed while that knee was put in his neck. Oh, and by the way, knee to the neck, 6 minutes and 7 seconds. You didn't hear much about this now, did you, in your news media? And like I am saying to you, dear listener, this is something that's been going on every day in the United States. And as I've said in prior episodes to you, these are happening and they're not even getting media attention. And they're on video and not getting media attention from the news media at all. Los Angeles Times has detailed this, though. There was a settlement for the family of Mr. Hernandez for $5.5 million. Oh my goodness me. $5.5 million. I know that no money will bring Angel Zapata Hernandez back. But Mr. Zapata Hernandez family settled for $5.5 million with the Metropolitan Transit Service security workers, aka police, right? For the transit system there in San Diego. And the video was released publicly. I've not watched it. And it says here in the LA Times report, contains scenes that some viewers may find disturbing. And they put a link to the video. This article, by the way, is called Months Before George Floyd's Death, Angel Zapata Hernandez died in San Diego with a knee to his neck. Dateline, April 25th, 2021. So that would have been 3 days ago now. Greg Moran and David Hernandez. And actually, they are from the San Diego Union Tribune, and the LA Times has picked up that story here. So it's syndicated to the LA Times. And again, they do the same thing that the defense did with the George Floyd murder of George Floyd. And the defense for Derek Chauvin, the defendant and now convicted murderer, said, well, he didn't die because of what the defendant did. He died because he had drugs in the system. And that's what we're seeing here. And I read this story right in front of me. It talks about, Mr. Zapata Hernandez had drugs in his system. And like, why does that matter? When you've got a knee in your neck for 6 minutes and, 7 seconds, 9 seconds? How many seconds? Add up the total number of seconds. When you've got a knee in your neck for that long, no one's talking about that. They're talking about the drugs? Really? 24 years old, Angel Zapata Hernandez, in handcuffs. 6 minutes and 7 seconds, with one of them on the knee in the neck of this young brother, this young brother. 6 minutes and 7 seconds. You know, maybe people should count off 6 minutes and 7 seconds. Can you hold your breath for 6 minutes and 7 seconds? Because literally, when that Metropolitan Transit security worker did that on October 15, 2019, that's what he did. He cut off oxygen to Mr. Hernandez, Zapata Hernandez, for 6 minutes and 7 seconds. I want you to hold your breath for 6 minutes and 7 seconds right now. See how far you get. So I'm making that point and making a number of other points here before I get to some other things, or one other thing I really wanted to hit home with. This was an hour-long video in the case of Angel Zapata Hernandez. This was nearly an hour-long video from the body cameras of the two officers, the two cops. And since when does being dazed or confused mean that you've got to end up dead? And again, that's a whole denial of a black or brown person's humanity going on there. When these news stories, he was non-responsive to questions. He didn't seem coherent. So you got to kill him? It's your eagerness as a cop, as a white cop, to end our humanity. Oh, we didn't comply fast enough. We didn't comply. So you got to kill us? Really? How does not complying mean you got to end up killing us? You got handcuffs on this guy. Oh, he didn't comply. Oh, he was non-responsive. Oh, they kept asking him for his name and his birth date. Could it be that Angel Zapata Hernandez did not speak English as his first language? Is that not possible? Not at all. And you've got these two cops or these two transit workers who don't care about that. No, does that ever creep into the back of your little mind? No, of course it didn't creep into the back of their little minds, or their tiny hearts, or anything else that they have that's probably tiny as well. Struggles to answer questions. Well, could that be because he also may not understand English. It's like, oh, he struggled to answer questions, so we've got to kill him. That is the absolute psychopathic way of the country. It's like in the movies, honestly. And it's a reflection of the actual society. Some of these killings in movies, it's absolutely the same as what you're seeing in these police forces and departments. I bet hardly anybody listening to this podcast episode right now, knows who Angel Zapata Hernandez was. I'll bet you nobody does. I'm going to be that bold to pronounce that here. That no one listening prior to right now was even aware of who Angel Zapata Hernandez was, and that he died in San Diego, California, with a knee to his neck. Just 7 months before George Floyd did. Both of them were in handcuffs. Both of them had knees to their necks for in excess of 6 minutes. In George Floyd's case, nearly 10 minutes. He's lifting my whole body weight up, an officer says at one point. One officer, this is from the LA Times or the San Diego Times Union, but the LA Times is where it syndicated this particular column, this particular story from just a couple of days ago. One officer also appears to put a knee on Mr. Zapata Hernandez's back and leaves it there for about 4 minutes as Gonzalez gasps for air. Excuse me, wait a minute now. I'm reading something else to you. This is another one I'm reading from. You know, this is yet another case. What I just read to you is not even Angel Zapata Hernandez. That little brief excerpt. I've talked about Angel Zapata Hernandez in San Diego. What I just read about the identification and all of that kind of thing, and he's lifting my whole body weight up. That's from another case of a brown person being murdered by police. Here is the LA Times again. This is serious. Juliet Williams, actually, again, this time it's the Associated Press that is syndicating their article into the LA Times. April 27th, 2021. Headline, police video shows Bay Area Latino man died after police pinned him to the ground. So this is another one in addition to Angel Zapata Hernandez. This is literally from just 9 days ago, April the 19th, the day before the guilty verdict for Derek Chauvin. Let me just read this. This is Dateline San Francisco. This happened in Alameda, Alameda, A-L-A-M-E-D-A. Alameda is a county in the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area, that is east of San Francisco. It's near Oakland, in the East Bay, in the San Francisco Bay Area. So if you're traveling across the Bay Bridge, that's traveling from San Francisco going east into Oakland on the San Francisco Bay Bridge. You will get to Alameda. Alameda and Oakland are pretty much neighboring. They may be in the same county, actually. But Alameda is a neighboring city to Oakland. I'll put it that way. I should know my San Francisco Bay Area geography better than this, but I presume that they're fairly close together, those cities. They're not far away. So just last week, police in the Bay Area city of Alameda released body camera video late Tuesday that shows officers pinning a Latino man to the ground for more than 5 minutes during an arrest last week that ended in his death. Mario Gonzalez, 26, stopped breathing after the April 19th scuffle with police at a park in Alameda. A police statement said Gonzalez had a medical emergency after officers tried to handcuff him. His family contends he was killed by police who used excessive force. This is the hour-long video, right? The nearly hour-long video from two officers' body cameras show him to be dazed. And this is what I meant. This is what I was reading from. So this guy's dazed. And like I said, could it be because he doesn't speak English as his first language? And like I say, no matter whether he's dazed, whether he's on drugs or what, that means you've got to kill him. When Gonzalez didn't produce any ID, the officers tried to force his hands behind his back to handcuff him. So wait, because he's not produced identification, your next move is handcuffs? What? Really? I really would like to speak to either a police commissioner or community relations officer in San Francisco's police department and ask them, really, your policy, or at least, San Francisco's had its own history with this. Mario Woods from a few short years ago, right? And others, right? San Francisco is not immune, like I've said. Every city in this country has had more than one of these murders of black and brown or brown people, or both, right? So I would like to ask somebody in the SFPD, is it your policy to handcuff people if they don't produce ID or if they don't have any? Really? But in this case, this is what they did in Alameda. Alameda, again, is, I'd say, about 15 miles east of San Francisco, somewhere around there. And then after they've handcuffed him, according to this story, the officer's repeatedly asking for his full name and birth date. We're going to take care of you, okay? This is from the video. We're going to take care of you, okay? We're going to take care of you, one officer says. I just think you've had too much to drink today, okay? So you've got to handcuff him and throw him down to, oh, Mario, just please stop fighting us. Then the article told, he weighs 250 pounds. See, you're always mentioning how big someone is or how small they are. It's like, why are you mentioning how big or small? Why are you all obsessed with size of a person? Is it because you're small? Is it because everything in the world is so much bigger than you and who you are? So that you've got to talk about someone's weight or how big they are, or why? Is it because you feel inadequate somehow? So you've got to make being big a problem or an evil that you've got to eradicate because you somehow feel intimidated or threatened? I don't know. I'm asking for my listeners. I'm asking for the sake of putting that question into the ether. Ooh, he's lifting my whole body weight up, an officer says at one point. One officer also appears to put a knee on his back and leaves it there for about 4 minutes as Gonzalez gasps for air, saying, quote, I didn't do nothing, okay? Listen to how passive this next line is in the article. Gonzalez's protests appear to weaken, and after about 5 minutes, he seems to lose consciousness. Oh, he seems to lose consciousness. I think he seems to be getting murdered by the damn police. How about that? But, they're never going to write that kind of line, are they? Now? It's just horrible. Gonzalez left a 4-year-old son and was also the main caretaker of his 22-year-old brother who has autism, his family said. This is just, again, This is just, and Latinos are being shot down dead in this state of California, and nobody gives a rat's. Nobody gives a crap about it. I'm telling you, except for the obvious, the activists and the families, they care. And a few other people care. But most people, they just drive by. They just do a Dionne Warwick, walk on by. Nobody. This is the thing. We've got to start caring about each other. But we're not doing that. And again, my whole point in all of this is to say that this is the way that our society here deals with human beings by killing them and not caring about their humanity and not taking steps to engage with them and ascertain what these individuals need. They are not a danger to anyone. It's these cops are lazy and the system says, get rid of these people that we hate. Get rid of them. And they do so. It's this legalized assassinations. These legalized assassinations of black people, of brown people, daily, by the state, daily. I don't want to hear about, there's gun violence in your community too. This ain't about that, because as I keep saying, the people who do that in our communities go to prison for it. And we protest about that. Never gets covered, but we protest against that too. And those people who do that, that 2% of the community that does that, they go to prison. These cops don't. Very, very rarely. They don't even get indicted or arrested. This is a real problem. And that report I told you about, the international report, where it was studying decades, years of these assassinations by police of people who are black, of African descent, finding that these are crimes against humanity. Well, they most certainly are. They most certainly are. And you can't turn away from that and think that your life is so great and that you're living in this great country when you've got that same so-called great country murdering people who live in it right next to you, in the town over, in 2 towns over, in 3 towns over, down the highway, down the street. You can't, because that must require for you, and does require for you, a special degree of sociopathic behavior and denial, and psychopathic behavior and denial. It does, by definition. So when those people in Elizabeth City are angry at the police, they have many good reasons for it. I don't have to say that, but you know that. But they shouldn't be the only ones who are angry. Just wanted to say to you, dear listener, that there is a hearing going on there was a hearing going on in North Carolina's courts today to ascertain whether or not the police should release the full body camera video of the assassination, the execution of Andrew Brown Jr. Yes, would you believe that is actually in court? It was in court today. My goodness me. There must be something on that video that they do not want us to see. But we've got to be able to see it.
He attacked me for talking to James Dyson about ventilators, where we're now sending ventilators to help the people of India. And the following day, Mr. Speaker, the Labour front bench said that any Prime Minister in my position would have done exactly the same thing.
Welcome back. That was Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, earlier today, absolutely losing it And I will play more of that in a few moments. But Boris Johnson is someone who is not known to be someone in control of anything. Except the only thing he's in control of is constant womanizing, constant lying. He is in very good control of that. He knows how to continue to lie at a drop of a hat. He knows how to do that. And he's also said so many racist and misogynistic things. And when he has been accused of saying things to the effect of, let the bodies pile high in their thousands, and that he would rather see bodies pile high in their thousands than order a third lockdown. You can take it to the bank that he said that. I'm telling you, right? And there'd been many backups of that reporting, and I can't believe I'm reading that from the Daily Mail. Oh my God, the Daily Mail. I mean, I actually had to say to myself, are the Barclay brothers still the owners of the Daily Mail in London? The Barclay brothers, those billionaires. I almost said another word. And I guess you can occasionally have some good reporting coming out of a rag like that. And Simon Walters and others who write for that publication, in quotes, have done a good job here. Because not only that, they're the BBC, not the best of institutions. At least they are much more kissing the backsides of the Tories since 0.100 hours or whatever. I have to tell you, I really have to tell you that you've got all these other news sources corroborating that there are other people out here saying what is apparently has been said. Downing Street has strongly denied that he made the comment. Come on. If you've listened to anything that Boris Johnson has said, and particularly if you are in the UK, if you are specifically in England, but if you're anywhere in the UK, Northern Ireland, in Scotland, in Wales, right, as well as England, you would know that this is the kind of thing that Boris Johnson would have said. He has written in the Daily Telegraph and in other papers about the I hate this word. This is not a word I like to say. Pickaninnies. He said that, referring to black people, greeting the Commonwealth, or greeting the Queen or the royal officials. He actually wrote that in a Daily Telegraph column or in a column in a newspaper when he was writing for the Telegraph. So he's said this stuff in print. He said things in person. Remember when he was running for Conservative leader in 2018 or 19, whenever it was. Would have been 2019. And he said, I'm the best friend of banker. I'm just paraphrasing. He was in Birmingham in England at one of the hustings, they call them, the Tory hustings, where you sit in front of someone who's asking you questions. And on that day, it was Ian Dale of LBC News. Ian Dale is a Conservative. I respect him. I like him, actually. I don't agree with a lot of some of what he says. I think he's a good journalist, though. And he used to be involved in politics, Ian Dale. So Ian Dale is asking him a question. This is back in 2019. And he says, in his answer, this is on a Saturday. And Boris Johnson says to the people in Birmingham, and of course, this is pre-COVID, I am the best friend a banker, and I'm paraphrasing it, I'm the best friend a banker could have, a stock market person could have. I care about the stock market. I'll fight for it. They know they've got a friend in me. Now, again, it's slightly different from that, but it's the same kind of thing, he said. He basically said, no one's fought harder for the banks and for the stock market than I have. No one's fought harder. Seriously. And he said that publicly. This is the kind of thing. So if you hear that he said or reportedly said or allegedly said, I'd rather see bodies pile high in their thousands than order a third lockdown. Trust me, take it to the bank. That guy said it. Okay, I wasn't there. You weren't there. But come on now. This is not something people would make up about Boris Johnson. This is Boris Johnson to a T. It sounds like Boris Johnson. All the kinds of blustery, puffery BS that he says and has said for the last 35 years now, this is entirely consonant with who Boris Johnson is and what he would say. And you've got people, albeit anonymously, saying that they heard him say it. And Dominic Cummings, who would have thought that he would be the one to come back and try to drive a nail into the political coffin of one Boris Johnson? I mean, Dominic Cummings was a senior advisor, thick as thieves, with Boris Johnson. And all of a sudden, since, of course, finally they got Dominic Cummings out of there, all of a sudden now he's turning around and saying, nope, this guy said it. He's going to testify to all this next month before an independent inquiry. That Boris Johnson said all these things. Boris Johnson was involved in these deals to refurbish his apartment. He didn't pay for it. He got someone else to do it. I mean, this guy, Boris Johnson, is the most... to call him sleaze. In fact, they're not even calling him sleaze. Well, Sakir Starmer did today at Prime Minister's Questions, which is what you heard a clip of just there. Boris Johnson, who really was feeling the heat. This wasn't a heated exchange. This is Boris Johnson in a meltdown. He got burned. And you heard it. And I'm going to play you the full, well, it's an amalgam of clips put together by Sky News. I'm going to play that for you in a few moments. You judge for yourself whether this is a heated exchange or whether, and I guess it's clips, so it's not complete context. But you judge for me who is angry here about being called something or being accused of something, I should say. Because you wouldn't have to get that angry if you, at least I don't think so. You wouldn't have to be so defensive. Oh, I didn't say this. I didn't. And so angry? Really? You've got to listen to this in a few moments. I promise I'll play this. But this administration, this conservative government is really a problem. And here's my thing. I want you to think about this while I play this to you. Why are the Tories still in power? And never mind the analysis of the Labour Party, who I think can't make its way out of a paper bag at times. Will it be any different on May the 6th when the election arrives? I want you to contemplate that. But I want you to contemplate that while you're listening to this.
Either the taxpayer paid the initial invoice, or it was the Conservative Party, or it was a private donor, or it was the Prime Minister. So I'm making it easy for the Prime Minister. It's now multiple choice. There are only 4 options. It should be easier than finding the chatty rat, Mr. Speaker.
What I believe has been strained to breaking point is the credulity of the public. He has half an hour every week to put serious and sensible questions to me about the state of the pandemic, about the vaccine rollout, about what we're doing to support our NHS, about what we're doing to fight crime, about what we're doing to bounce back from this pandemic, about the economic recovery, about jobs for the people of this country. And he goes on and on, Mr. Speaker, about wallpaper when, as I've told him umpteen times now, I paid for it.
Mr. Speaker, don't the British people deserve a Prime Minister they can trust and a government that isn't mired in sleaze, cronyism and scandal?
He attacked me for talking to James Dyson about ventilators, where we're now sending ventilators to help the people of India. And the following day, Mr. Speaker, the Labour front bench said that any Prime Minister in my position would have done exactly the same thing. Our friends in the European Union voted to approve our Brexit deal, which he opposed. which enables us not just to take back control of our borders, Mr. Speaker, but to deliver free, which it does, which he fervently opposed. Taking back control of our country has allowed us to deliver the fastest vaccine rollout in Europe, as he well knows, Mr. Speaker, which would not have been possible if we'd stayed in the European Medicines Agency, which he voted for. Mr. Speaker, week after week, the people of this country can see the difference between a Labour Party that twists and turns with the wind, that thinks of nothing except playing political games, whereas this party gets on with delivering on the people's priorities.
This is just... Boris Johnson, I tell you, you've got to think, though, about why this guy is still in power, and even beyond him, why is the Conservative Party in the UK still in power? I get it, you've got a big majority. I get it, the Labour Party really has its own issues too. Jeremy Corbyn was not the best leader for the party, and I know that there are people, including myself, who actually supported him, who actually did think that the guy was straight ahead and had some really good, important things to say. But the fact of the matter is, Jeremy Corbyn was a liability. It was leaked out that some of the more moderate members of the Labour Party had made it very clear that they were not enamored with Corbyn. I mean, that whole thing with John Ashworth, who is the Shadow Health Minister, I think still, that whole audio that got leaked just a few days before, I didn't know my mate was taping me. Oh yeah, come on, you did. It was all about, and yeah, excuse my cynicism is legendary. But it's important to be cynical, though. It is. I mean, I actually think it's healthy to be cynical. It's not this, the politicians tell you don't be cynicism is bad. Well, you can be cynical and you can also have a degree of hope. It's not like one or the other. You can have both. And I am both. Especially when you get older, you do. Come on, because you've seen this before. Oh, my goodness. But the whole thing here is that it's the party. Labour has had its ups and downs, but these Conservatives have been absolutely destroying the United Kingdom. They've been destroying England since, the 60s? I mean, it's been even before the 1960s. But I just think about what happened with Harold Macmillan's government, and it just seemed to be a complete forerunner. And I'm sure there were other scandals before then, but that one was a huge freaking scandal with John Profumo. The John Profumo affair. The Profumo affair was a big effing deal in 1963. And Christine Keeler and Mandy Reese-Davies and Lucky Gordon and all the rest of it, right? Stephen Ward. And if you don't know who any of those people are, please do some research. I don't want to explain. Or go watch the movie Scandal, which is a good movie, but I really recommend that you actually read about these individuals that I've talked about, because it's and also Christine Keeler wrote a book, some kind of an autobiographical book on the film. Well, not on the film, but on her life and on her involvement with a Soviet naval attaché spy named Ivanov, or I think Sergei Ivanov, But you've got to see this movie. But besides that, please study up on who those people are, and not Wikipedia, please, because everything in Wikipedia ain't accurate, right? So please do some research. You've got online. Hopefully you've got internet connection. If you care, 5 minutes in looking up those people I've just mentioned. But I don't think the scandals have... I mean, there have been so many scandals, right, in these political parties in England, but especially the Conservatives. And I'm telling you, when that happened in 63, that was the end of Harold Macmillan, and you've never had it so good, right? I mean, it was so bad. And that government collapsed. It literally did. John Profumo was the war minister. He had to resign, and it really led to the end of the Macmillan government. I mean, it really did. And we've had scandal after scandal, and the Tories are just in the toilet. I mean, but they continue to win these elections. Yeah, they cut funding of the Metropolitan Police. They cut the numbers of police. Every year for 12 years they've done this. It started under Theresa May when she was Home Secretary, before she became Prime Minister. They just kept cutting back on police. Cutting back. And some people would say that's a good thing. Some people really would say that's a good thing. I mean, but here's the thing. There's been scandal after scandal. You've got ministers behaving like wild hyenas. You've got people in that cabinet of Boris Johnson breaking the ministerial code. And you've got Boris Johnson saying, oh, I don't care what your stinking independent review says. You can sod off with that. You can piss off with that. I'm keeping Priti Patel exactly where she is. Priti Patel can stay Home Secretary. Now, piss off. And that's literally what the independent civil servant of nearly 50 years did. After he offered his advisory opinion and my investigative independent review, I find that Priti Patel, who bullied members of the civil service, I find that she is in breach of the ministerial code and she thus should resign. And Boris Johnson said, thank you for your independent review. Now piss off. I'm going to form a circle around the Pritsta. And that's that. And he literally pissed off and quit his 47 or 48 year position as a civil service person, a civil servant for that long, had great respect in civil service. And he quit. He literally ended his tenure right after that. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom overruled him. And it's so obvious that Priti Patel was bullying people. So obvious. But doesn't matter. And I think that's what's really dangerous. And then all of this stuff that's going on, doing deals with people, getting James Dyson, the British billionaire, to do this and to do that, and text messages showing all of that, and, you know, all the kinds of cuts these people are making. It's just really criminal. And the other thing that's so bogus about Boris Johnson, among many other things, is he's talking about, in that clip you heard, oh, we're giving his ventilators are going to India, and we're doing this for India. And this is the country that the British colonized, right? And killed people, right? Colonized them, killed people. They don't massacre people. In Pakistan as well, but in India, massacred people in India. And oh, we're doing this for India to help the people there. This crisis has been going on in India for more than a month. And now you're just helping them? It's been going on for longer than that. Their rates of COVID-19, through the roof. Through the blooming roof. And this is the thing that you're not hearing. So he's talking about how benevolent the Tory government is. Meanwhile, at the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, UK to slash funding for overseas water and sanitation projects by 80%. 80%. Scale of aid cut emerges in leaked FCDO memo, prompting experts to describe it as, quote, a national shame. This is written by Amelia Hill in Wednesday, April the 28th, 2021's edition of The Guardian. The UK is to slash funding for life-saving water, sanitation, and hygiene projects in developing nations by more than 80%, according to a leaked memo. And that's 80, as in 80%. The cuts have been described as, quote, savage, incredible, and a national shame by experts, highlighting that sanitation and hand washing is a key line of defense during the coronavirus pandemic. The reduction to the bilateral aid budget was revealed as details emerged of cuts in the foreign aid budget. The government has come under sustained criticism. The government, when they say the government, when Amelia Hill writes that, she's talking about the Tories. She's talking about the Conservatives. She's talking about Boris Johnson's government. Has come under sustained criticism for shelving its manifesto commitment to spend 0.7, that's 0.7% of national income on overseas aid. Cutting that to 0.5%. That is half of 1% of government's income, national income. Half of 1%. The Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, God, isn't he a great Foreign Secretary? My goodness me. Give him a medal. Give him a ribbon. Was lambasted for having given scant detail of how the cut would affect overseas aid spending when publishing a statement last week. I'm going to read this last piece here. Further details have emerged from the leak in the form of a document prepared for the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office Minister Wendy Morton and first reported by The Telegraph. The Telegraph. Oh my goodness, who knew that a rag newspaper like that? That's two today. The Daily Mail and The Telegraph. Who knew that there actually are some good reporters there? They are awesome good reporters. It doesn't necessarily mean that everybody at The Telegraph is evil. Quote, we expect criticism on the reduction in spend, particularly, this is from the memo, right, that got leaked. And this is what the memo reads, and I'm reading this out now. Quote, we expect criticism on the reduction in spend, particularly as the UK public views water, sanitation and hygiene as a priority area for UK aid because hand hygiene is widely recognized as a critical intervention to counter the spread of COVID-19 and because the cuts are being announced in the year that the UK is hosting COP26, end quote. COP26 is a summit that's being held, climate summit that's being held in the UK this year. Boris Johnson in London is hosting it. So, what is Boris Johnson screaming about and getting angry about when he's talking in Prime Minister's Questions today to Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader that you heard earlier on? What is Boris Johnson getting so angry about? Talking about, oh, we're giving aid. We're giving the ventilators, James Dyson's ventilators, to help India. But you're cutting the budget for sanitation and hygiene and water to so-called developing nations. And I guess some people would view India as a so-called developing nation that the UK had colonized and made it so-called developing, right? There's something arrogant about calling people third world countries when your country is the one, or any country is the one, but your country is the one that actually stole the resources from it, colonized it, killed people, took their land, took their and then you turn around and call it a third world country. That's why you don't hear me saying things like third world country. Well, I've just said it, but you know what I mean. I don't call them third world countries. These are countries that had their wealth and their land stolen and colonized, right? That's what you should be calling those countries. Great nations that had great empires and kingdoms and queendoms and education that were decimated by the British. People don't say the words, the sun will never set on the British Empire for nothing. There's a reason why they said those words, right? The sun shall never set on the British Empire. There are real reasons, historical ones, grounded in history and in fact, that inform why that was being said and why some people were saying that. So Boris Johnson can sit there all he wants and get harumphing and getting angry and blowing his top in the House of Commons today. Completely losing his cool. Absolutely losing his nut. Doing his nut, really. And it wasn't reported like that by Sky News, but that's what it was. It wasn't a heated exchange. It was a one-way rant from, well, some people might say that about this podcast. But I'm telling you, it was a one-way ticket to the blonde bullshit artist blowing his top, blowing his stack. Absolutely losing it. Losing it. That is not a man in control. And then you read this story from Amelia Hill, slashing the budget for these projects that would have helped India too, by the way. Water Aid Charity Chief Executive Tim Wainwright. There is never a good time to cut aid for life-saving water and sanitation, but the middle of the worst pandemic for 100 years must be one of the worst. What is even more incredible, Wainwright goes on to say, is that these savage cuts to the funding of water and sanitation, which are the first line of defense against the twin threats of COVID-19 and the impacts of climate change in the world's poorest countries, should happen just months ahead of the G7 and COP26 climate summits, at which the UK is wanting to demonstrate global leadership. We've even got Conservative MPs saying that this is wrong. They're attacking their own government, the Conservative government. Andrew Mitchell, former International Development Secretary, a Conservative MP, Member of Parliament, said the move would, quote, be extremely unpopular and undermine Britain's reputation. Reputation for what? What's Britain's reputation? You mean for our great colonizing prowess? Is that it? Because I'm from Britain. I'm born and raised and grew up in England. From there. Is that the reputation that we have? Oh, thoroughly great reputation for colonizing 60% of the earth. Is that what reputation? The Conservative MP said, quote, access to water and sanitation is consistently the UK public's top priority when polled about what aid should be spent on. We are balancing the books on the backs of the poorest and most vulnerable people in the world. And it is a matter of national shame for our country to be slashing spending in this way. This will be extremely unpopular and will undermine Britain's reputation ahead of hosting the G7, and the climate change COP ministers must, climate change COP, ministers must put these cuts to a vote. Let's see if they do. But I really want to ask you this, dear listener. If you're in the UK, or if you are someone who is overseas who votes in the UK elections, why is Boris Johnson and this Tory government still in power? Why? Why is it that Labour isn't making enough hay? Again, I'm not a person who believes in these polls. You know that if you've listened long enough here. But why is it that I still think, or that maybe you still think, that the Conservatives are still going to do very well in these elections next week on May 6th, Thursday, May 6th of 2021? I don't understand. Is it that there are giant swaths of the English public in particular who are just very conservative? Is it that there are giant swaths of the English public who are racist and misogynist? Is it that there are lots of people in the English public, or maybe by extension the UK public, but I want to say English, right, who are seduced by the right-wing news media and its garbage that it puts out there and its lies? Is it that large swaths of the English public just don't care about what Boris Johnson and the Conservatives do, as long as their own lives aren't materially damaged by it? Is it that the English public, large swaths of whom may have a Conservative MP and say, well, she's doing a good job, so I'm not going to vote them out? Even though the guy at number 10 is a sleazebag and a piece of garbage, my MP down the road here, she's doing a good job. I'm not voting her out. Or is it because some members or large swaths or a sizable number of people in the English public say, I am so tribal, I'm never going to allow someone from the Labour Party, the Lib Dem Party, the Green Party, to ever be in power. I'm not going to vote for them. Ooh, they stand for this, they stand for that, and I don't believe in it because it's evil. Because feeding everybody is evil to me, and that's going to threaten me. So I'm not going to vote for them. I'm going to vote Conservative no matter what. Rah, rah, rah. Is that what it is? Is it that Labour is completely inept? Is it that some people don't think Sir Keir Starmer is compelling enough a leader? Is it that Labour don't know what to do? What is it that accounts for why a sleaze bucket and racist and misogynist and a liar, a congenital liar like Boris Johnson and these thieving Conservatives, these corrupt, thieving ass, bullying, ministerial code violating Conservatives continue to be in power? Is it that there are members of the English public that are extremely provincial and parochial in their thinking? Is that what it is? Is it a lack of education? What is it that accounts for why, with all the cuts to all the things that would help the very voters who keep voting these Conservatives in and these MPs in, why is it that they continue to vote for them? With all the scandals, all the sleaze, all the confusion over lockdown, all of this, we're going to open everything up on June 21st, and all these variants that continue to come in. Oh, no, we're still going to open everything. Why are you continuing to vote for these Conservatives in England, in the UK at large? Why? Say why. Why are you doing that? And if you are doing that, are you going to stop doing that on May the 6th? The specials with why. And look, just a few other things I wanted to say before saying sayonara and bidding you adieu for this episode. First of all, the FBI in Charlotte have announced that it will be investigating, that it is investigating the assassination, the execution of Andrew Brown Jr. It is important that I do mention that, lest people forget or lest people not be informed about it, because you may not have known that. But that is something that was announced actually yesterday. And this is from Shelley Lynch, the public affairs specialist of the FBI Charlotte Division. Quote, "The FBI Charlotte field office has opened a federal civil rights investigation into the police-involved shooting death of Andrew Brown Jr. agents will work closely with the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of North Carolina and the Civil Rights Division at the Department of Justice to determine whether federal laws were violated. As this is an ongoing investigation, we cannot comment further. That was from yesterday. And I also want to thank Eugene Daniel from 13 News Now in Charlotte. In Charlotte, I believe, or in Norfolk, Virginia, wherever that station is there, that ABC affiliate. My apologies, 13 News Now for that. And there's other news that Mr. Daniel has just broken, actually. And that is that the judge, remember I said a few minutes earlier that a court was hearing whether or not to allow the full release of the body camera publicly to us all to see this body camera killing of this assassination of Andrew Brown Jr. Well, the judge has denied the petition by the media to publicly release that video. So to publicly release that video is not going to happen now, according to this judge. Superior Court Judge Jeffrey Foster is the one who says that he has denied the media's petition to publicly release the body camera footage of the deputies murdering Andrew Brown Jr. So the full video will not be released, and that's a real problem. That's a real problem. It is important to add that the judge will consider or reconsider that public release after the investigation. Because as I just mentioned, the FBI in Charlotte, North Carolina, is investigating this killing, this assassination, and investigating whether or not the civil rights were violated of, come on now, of course they were. Whether Andrew Brown Jr.'s civil rights were violated, of course they were. Oh my goodness me. Are you kidding? But they're doing the investigation. At least they're freaking well doing something. But, I mean, to investigate whether our rights are violated when it's clear that he was murdered. But we can't release the whole thing to the public. Not the whole thing. You can't see all of it. But you know what the family of Andrew Brown Jr. can see? All of a dead body riddled with bullets, including one to the back of his head. But this judge says he's going to reconsider after the investigation is complete. So there you go. That's how I end this particular episode tonight. Those of you who care enough about it will, if you're going to watch this live, get to watch President Biden outline plans with this American plans bill that he's doing, or this proposal that he's putting up, $1.8 trillion plan to help children, to fund education and the like, right? And also to pay better wages. Federal contractors' wages have been risen by President Biden in an order. I believe he's raised that minimum wage for federal contract workers. He'll be talking about that and a lot more tonight in the joint session of Congress, his first message as president to the joint session. It will not be called the State of the Union address. That doesn't happen until next year when he's been in for a full year plus of his term. But the first term in office for any president, the first year of that term, their first address to the joint session is called the joint session. It's not called the State of the Union because he's not been in the office long enough, although he knows what the State of the Union is, as do you and I. And we've not been in the presidency long enough either, right? We've not been there at all. So that's tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern Time in the U.S., 6 p.m. Pacific Time in the U.S., and if you are in London, for example, that would be 2 a.m. I think I said 1 a.m. yesterday, and I was wrong. 2 a.m. Thursday morning. So if you really want to see President Biden live, if you're in the UK, if you are in Ireland, by the way, outside of the UK, but if you're in Ireland and you want to see your native son, I think isn't his native, is it Kilkenny that he's got roots from originally? I'm not sure. Someone in Ireland will correct me, I'm sure. But wherever you are in Ireland, if you want to see a native son giving an address, he's only the second Catholic president, by the way, that the United States has ever had. But if you want to see him give a live address, then you can be up at 2 a.m. in the morning on Thursday morning to watch that address. Or you can just watch it on Twitter whenever you want to. The address will be found on Twitter. It'll be there streaming live. It will be on the White House YouTube channel. It will be all over television. It'll be all over your TVs. So I'll be talking a bit about a book. Gosh, can I talk today? I will be talking a little bit about President Biden's address. It's so funny because some people say, "Oh, you speak so slowly." It's like, that's not always true. And I don't speak very slowly compared to lots of other people. And the thing is, it's good to actually have podcasts where someone isn't talking a mile a minute. Even though I may talk a mile a minute, I don't do it at top speed. I think it's because people are so used to that in the culture that they're in that everybody speaks so, well, not everybody, but some people speak so quickly because it's the fast food environment that we live in, that you've always got to cram as many many words into a second as you can, because otherwise you have these uncomfortable, oh my God, the silence is uncomfortable, I can't deal with it. Because you're living in this hyper sped up world where you don't even have time to even think your thoughts before you've got to put another word out into the ether that may or may not mean something, right? So, you got to speak quick. No, you don't. You don't. And if people don't like podcasts where people actually contemplate things and actually pause and actually give you time to kind of think and meditate, maybe even, if you don't like that, of course, there's billions of podcasts where people are speaking with every breath and every second of air is filled with their voice. If that's what people want, of course, there's plenty out there for you. But I did want to end this again on that note of what's going on with Andrew Brown Jr.'s case, because this is very serious, folks. And yes, we'll see, by the way, if President Biden speaks about Andrew Brown Jr. or speaks about George Floyd or speaks about Ma'Khia Bryant or speaks about Daunte Wright or speaks about Adam Toledo or speaks about Jacob Blake Jr. or speaks I can go on for the next 10 minutes, can't I? Tatiana Jefferson, Sandra Bland, Eric Garner, the brother last week in Virginia, or Angel Zapata Hernandez, or the brother up in Alameda County across the way from here in San Francisco, in Alameda, about that brother the young Latino brother who was held down for 5-6 minutes. Mario Gonzalez. I wonder if President Biden will mention any of their names tonight. Tune in and find out. Thank you very much for listening to this edition of the Politicrat. I'm Omar Moore.